Thanks, Tracy, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You're all very welcome to today's webinar, which focuses on the management of food allergens, particularly for food businesses. The term food hypersensitivity refers to a whole spectrum of food-induced health conditions, but for the purposes of this webinar, we will simply define it as a collective term for food allergy, food intolerance, and celiac disease. It's important not to think of food hypersensitivity as just another kind of food poisoning. Take, for instance, meat that has been improperly handled and stored and is then served uncooked. This is a health risk for anybody who eats it. Similarly, a food containing a toxic chemical, such as a fungal toxin, for instance, is a health risk for everyone. True, some people are more susceptible to illness than others, for a whole raft of reasons. But the point is, no matter what our age or state of health, we must do everything we can to avoid eating food contaminated with microbial or chemical hazards, and there are no exceptions. Some people are hypersensitive to certain ordinary foods that are part of a healthy balanced diet for everyone else. So many of you attending this webinar today will eat or have eaten cereal-based foods such as breakfast cereal, sandwiches, pasta, etc. And these are part of your healthy balanced diet, and you didn't need to give a second's thought to whether or not they contained gluten, which for you is just part of your dietary protein intake. Not so for those with celiac disease, wheat allergy, or non-celiac gluten sensitivity. They need to give a lot more than a second's thought to the foods they eat as they react to certain proteins in cereals. Living with food hypersensitivity presents a number of challenges. As there is no cure, the risk of exposure is managed through strict adherence to an avoidance diet. Avoidance diets are more easily achievable in theory than in practice, and this generates a lot of anxiety for both the people affected and their families, particularly where the impact of exposure can be severe, such as with a severe food allergy. Primary health care requirements, such as GP and consultants visits, can be significant depending on the severity of the food hypersensitivity, and research has shown that those with food allergy visit their healthcare professional more times per year, and the incurred healthcare costs are therefore greater. A food hypersensitivity may impact on a person's potential, such as in employment or education. And there may be intangible costs, such as impacts on quality of life. For instance, food allergy has been shown to have a strong negative impact on health-related quality of life scores for all age groups and in parents of allergic children. In fact, these scores for food allergy are worse than for other chronic pediatric diseases, including type 1 diabetes. And yet, despite these challenges, people with food hypersensitivity still eat out. Research carried out by SafeFood and the Food Standards Agency in Belfast back in 2012 shows that, at least for consumers who have a food allergy, they eat out just as frequently as anybody else. Almost 50% of survey respondents reported eating out once a month or almost once a month. Compare this to the findings of a report by Bord Bia in 2011. The report provides a detailed perspective on how consumers in the Republic, Britain and Northern Ireland view food-related issues and report their behaviours. They found that 29% of respondents ate out a few times to once a month. So the evidence suggests that people with food hypersensitivity are no different than anybody else when it comes to eating outside the home. It is important for all food businesses to understand that food hypersensitivity is not uncommon. The prevalence of food allergy in Ireland and the United Kingdom is given between 5 to 8% of children and 1 to 2% of adults. Again, our research from 2012 showed the top 3 food allergies on the island of Ireland were due to peanut, nut, or tree nuts as they're often called, and egg. We also have evidence from the United Kingdom and internationally that for some food allergies, such as peanut allergy, the rate is increasing. There are no statistics available for food allergy-related deaths in the Republic of Ireland, but in the United Kingdom it has been estimated there are, on average, 6 to 10 deaths per year, mostly due to peanut allergy. The prevalence of celiac disease on the island of Ireland is estimated at about 1% of the population. What about the prevalence of food intolerance? Approximately 5% of the population suffer from some form of lactose intolerance, but for the other intolerances, including non-celiac gluten sensitivity, we just don't know what the prevalence is. Several educated guesstimates have been made in other countries to try and calculate the overall prevalence of food hypersensitivity, and some estimates are as high as 40 to 45% of the whole population. Even if we take a conservative estimate of, say, 10 to 15%, then we could be talking about anything from 600 to 900,000 people on the island of Ireland having a food hypersensitivity. Whatever the number, it is clear that this cannot be ignored, and food businesses must take this into account and do what they can to accommodate these consumers. In addition to this, in recent years, we have seen a massive increase in demand for clean label food products, including products that are free from food allergens. According to Mintel, in 2016, the total free-from food product market in the Republic of Ireland was worth in excess of €60 million, and around €530 million in the United Kingdom. Also in 2016, Bord B estimated that upwards of 300,000 adults in the Republic of Ireland alone purchase free-from foods each week. However, it is important to clarify that allergen control and labelling legislation is focused on protection of food hypersensitive consumers who need to avoid food allergens for health reasons. Those who avoid allergens and other foods or food ingredients for lifestyle or cultural reasons are protected through other legislation under which to sell food that is not of the nature, substance and quality demanded by the consumer, or to falsely or misleadingly describe or present food, is an offence in law. All food businesses are now obliged to control food allergens in their products and on their premises. This includes the provision of accurate information on the allergen content of the foods they sell, whether these are pre-packed or sold loose. The key legislation in the European Union covering allergen labelling is Regulation 1169 of 2011, usually referred to as the Food Information for Consumers Regulation, or the FIC. This deals with labelling requirements for pre-packed, non-pre-packed or loose foods when any of 14 listed food allergens are used in their manufacture. Importantly, it does not explicitly deal with the possibility of these allergens getting into food due to cross-contact. Although the regulation came into force in December 2014, some food businesses are still experiencing difficulties in controlling food allergens and providing accurate allergen information to their customers. A Food Safety Authority of Ireland audit in May of this year found that 88% of food businesses were either not providing or providing inaccurate information with regard to the allergen content of their food products. In the same vein, roughly half of all the food alerts issued by the Food Safety Authority of Ireland in 2015 and 2016 concerned food allergens, mostly due to allergen non-labelling or mislabelling. And the vast majority of the resulting product recalls were instigated by the food businesses themselves. Unless product can be relabelled or reworked, then a recall of what is otherwise safe food probably results in that food being wasted. So what does the regulation say about labelling? Well, it simply states that the name of the allergen should be emphasized through a typeset that clearly distinguishes it from the rest of the list of ingredients, for example, by means of the font, style, or background color. The most popular approach by food manufacturers is to highlight the allergens in the list of ingredients on the label in bold type. So what are the regulated food allergens that must appear on the label or the menu if they are in the recipe? Cereals containing gluten comes first on the list. The actual cereals are specified as wheat, spelt, Coruscant wheat, commonly known as kamut, rye, barley and oats, and it is these that appear on the ingredient label. You only need to include the term gluten if this is an ingredient in its own right, and then you must state the source, so for instance wheat gluten. If you want to label a product as gluten-free, then you must show that the amount of gluten does not exceed 20 milligrams in every kilogram of the food, or 20 parts per million. This is straightforward for labelled food products that can be tested. However, what about food sold loose, for instance, in a restaurant? It isn't feasible to test a dish for the level of gluten, so better to avoid using the term gluten-free, which is now, after all, defined in law. Caterers take note. Some food products can be labelled very low gluten if gluten-free Codex wheat starch is used in their manufacture, and the final gluten level is between 20 and 100 milligrams per kilogram of food. The phrase no gluten containing ingredients cannot be used to describe individual food products or dishes, but rather to describe groups of dishes on a menu or a range of food products that are gluten-free. Again, caterers beware. As with many of the legislated food allergens, there are exceptions to the labelling, for instance glucose syrups that don't warrant allergen labelling. Food manufacturers should always check the specific details of the products that require labelling and those that don't by referring to the legislation. This can be accessed to the Food Safety Authority of Ireland's website or the Food Standards Agency's website. Oats are a listed source of gluten and must be highlighted on the label. Gluten-free oats still have to be highlighted with a footnote explaining how this was achieved. What about quinoa, amaranth and buckwheat? These are called pseudo-cereals, and they are generally gluten-free. However, it is always worth checking the label, just in case there is a may contain gluten advisory, as frequently these are processed in facilities that also handle gluten-containing cereals. Bulgur is a low-fat, high in minerals like manganese, magnesium and iron, plus it's a good source of plant-based protein and an excellent source of dietary fibre. It's popular in Asian cuisine. However, it contains gluten and therefore is subject to the allergen labelling requirements. Couscous is made from wheat and therefore contains gluten unless otherwise stated. Wheat flour alternatives such as corn flour, rice flour, tapioca starch, potato flour, sorghum flour do not require labelling. It's worth noting that a lot of the aforementioned pseudo-cereals and wheat flour alternatives are used in ethnic-type cuisines. Peanuts and peanut products. An allergy to peanut is one of the most serious food allergies, and most cases of food allergy-related anaphylaxis are caused by peanut. Peanut is a pretty versatile food and is used in the manufacture of a whole variety of food products, including cereals, biscuits, sauces and meat products. It is also commonly used in many ethnic, particularly Asian cuisines. Peanut is also used to produce oil and flour. Refined peanut oil is unlikely to cause a reaction, but unrefined peanut oil is unsuitable for anybody with a peanut allergy as it still contains the allergic proteins. Always check the label of nut and spice products to ensure they do not contain peanut either as a deliberate ingredient or because peanut may be present due to the risk of cross-contact, in which case there will probably be a precautionary allergen labelling advisory such as may contain peanut. Nuts are also on the list. Very often these are referred to as tree nuts. The actual nuts that must be labelled are specified: almonds, hazelnuts, walnuts, cashews, pecan nuts, Brazil nuts, pistachio nuts and macadamia nuts. And thankfully you don't have to give the Latin names. For nuts such as pecans and macadamias, you have to state pecan nuts and macadamia nuts, all highlighted. What about coconuts, pine nuts or chestnuts? Technically speaking, these are seeds rather than nuts. They do not require labelling. And there are a number of other exceptions that do not require labelling, and these are listed again in the regulation. Egg and egg products. This includes eggs from any source: hen, duck, goose, turkey, quail, pheasant, etc. Be careful with terminology. Suppose you use an ingredient that contains ovalbumin or albumin or lysozyme. Is this from egg? Was the product labelled as such? Both ovalbumin and lysozyme are allergenic. Albumin or ovalbumin is used as a binder in foods such as pastries, baked goods, processed meats, soups, stews, particularly for vegetarian considerations. Lecithin is an emulsifier and can be derived from egg. However, there are no reports of it being allergenic. Albumin proteins from egg, mustard, Brazil nut, castor bean and sesame seeds are allergenic. That is, they trigger allergic reactions. However, there are other egg proteins to which people may react, so if in doubt, better to label. And if you do use one of these ingredients, then be sure and state this on the label and include the word egg highlighted. Also, where it is obvious that a product contains egg, then labelling is not required. So for instance, a box of eggs doesn't have to be labelled that it contains eggs. Milk and milk products. The milk from all mammals share, to a varying extent, similar proteins, and therefore alternatives to cow's milk, such as goat, sheep, or even buffalo milk, are generally not recommended for use. Alternatives to mammalian milk, such as soy or rice milk, may not be suitable, for instance, for infants with milk allergy. Hydrolyzed formula is usually prescribed in this case. There are a number of milk-derived food ingredients that are not allergenic and therefore do not require highlighting on the label. These are listed again in the regulation. Also, where it is obvious that a product contains milk, then labelling is not required. Example, a bottle of milk. Also on the list are crustaceans and crustacean products, and mollusks and mollusk products. It's worth noting that the term shellfish is very often used to describe both crustaceans and mollusks. However, labelling has to be more specific than this. Crustaceans includes foods such as crab, lobster, prawn, shrimp, langoustines, and crayfish. Mollusks includes foods such as mussels, scallops, oysters, clams, squid, and octopus, snails, and periwinkles. Remember that on an ingredient label you can state the type of crustacean or mollusk in the ingredients, but you must also include the actual word crustaceans or mollusks in brackets and highlight it. Fish and fish products. Some people who are allergic to one species of fish have been advised to avoid all species of fish because the allergenic proteins may be the same. Fish or fish products can be used in a variety of foods. Anchovies are a common ingredient of sauces like Worcestershire sauce, salad dressings, and pizza toppings. Fish is often used in soups and stocks, pastes, stir-fry mixes, and oriental sauces. Surimi is a white fish-based food that mimics more expensive crab, lobster, and other crustaceans and shellfish. As with the other allergens, fish will be declared in brackets after the name of the fish ingredient, even with common species such as salmon, cod, and mackerel, unless the word is already included in the name, for instance, in swordfish. Also, if a food business wants to highlight that their product is actually a species of fish, for example, a batch of tilapia, they could use a statement like contains fish. With fish oil supplements, there is no guarantee that proteins have been completely removed in the process, so fish allergy sufferers better avoid. Once again, there are a number of fish-derived food ingredients that are not allergenic and therefore do not require highlighting on the label. These are listed again in the regulation. Sesame and sesame products. Sesame is found in a wide variety of food products, including bakery products, where it may inadvertently get into other bakery products as well. Sesame paste, or tahini, is used in Middle Eastern cooking and as an ingredient in hummus. Sesame oils used for cooking or stir-frying may be unrefined and are therefore considered high risk and should be highlighted as a potential source of sesame allergen. Soybean and soybean products. This includes soy milk. Fully refined soybean oil does not require highlighting on the label as it is not allergenic. Some of the vitamin additives used in food, like pies and dessert toppings, are derived from soya, as are phytosterols and plant stanol esters. These are not allergenic. Mustard and mustard products. Mustard allergy is not very common on the island of Ireland. Mustard is used in a wide variety of food products such as sauces, marinades, curries, soups, salad dressings, and of course as a condiment in its own right. It is also used for coatings on meat or fish products. Mustard comes in many forms, including sprouted seeds, leaves, flour, and oil. All are allergenic. People with mustard allergy should not eat any food if it contains mustard or canola meal or protein, or if it contains cold-pressed canola or rapeseed oil as an ingredient. However, canola and rape are not listed in the regulation and therefore do not have to be highlighted as allergens on a label. Finally, lupin and lupin products and celery products. As with mustard allergy, lupin and celery allergy are more problematic in continental European countries. Lupin flour is naturally gluten-free. It is sold as a healthy alternative to other cereal-based flours and is used especially in ethnic cuisine. It is an allergen and must be labelled as such. A lot of peanut allergy sufferers are also reactive to lupin. Celery and celeriac are from two different but related plants. Allergy sufferers must avoid both. Celery salt can be used in a variety of foods, including soups, sauces, stews, stocks, bouillon, and seasonings. It can also be used as a seasoning for tomato juice. It must be avoided. Sulfur dioxide and sulfites. Sulfur dioxide, which has an E number 220, and other sulfites with E numbers ranging from 221 to 228, are used as preservatives in a wide range of foods, including processed meats, soft drinks, and dried fruits and vegetables. Anyone who has asthma or allergic rhinitis may react to inhaling sulfur dioxide. If the level of sulfites expressed as sulfur dioxide exceeds 10 mg per kilogram or 10 mg per litre in the final food product as sold ready for consumption, then this must appear highlighted on the label. Because it is an actual listed food additive, its functional class must also appear on the label. It is not sufficient to label just the E number. For products where a list of ingredients is not required, such as alcoholic beverages with greater than 1.2% by volume of alcohol, the label must still indicate the presence of sulfur dioxide, such as contains sulfur dioxide. For both food manufacturers and caterers, who must now know if any of these 14 allergenic foods are in any of their products or dishes, it is important to remember that modern food processing can use just about any property of any food to achieve any characteristic in any other food. Always check the label of your ingredients. So those were the regulated food allergens. What about the unregulated food allergens? Research carried out by SafeFood in 2012 identified 50 common foods to which some consumers on the island of Ireland have developed an allergy. Worldwide, this figure is now upwards of 180 different foods. Remember this graph? We saw how we have more allergy to kiwi on the island of Ireland compared to allergies to a lot of the regulated food allergens such as celery and mustard. However, kiwi is not subject to the allergen labelling requirements, but should nonetheless be in the list of ingredients if it is in the recipe of a food product. Precautionary allergen labelling is used where the adventitious or accidental presence of any of the 14 regulated food allergens cannot be ruled out. Two recent Food Safety Authority of Ireland surveys in 2011 and 2012 showed widespread misuse of precautionary allergen labelling. Bear in mind that there is no legal obligation to use it, it is entirely voluntary. It must not mislead the consumer, and ideally it should be a last resort if, following a thorough assessment of the risk of cross-contact from an allergen in your production environment, you conclude that there is indeed a risk. If you do use it, then try if at all possible to be explicit in your choice of statements. Our research has found that consumers prefer statements such as not suitable for someone with a particular allergy rather than may contain X or produced in a factory where X is also used. Just a quick note on food allergen testing. According to our research, these are the specific allergen tests provided by companies operating on the island of Ireland. So we have tests for crab, lobster, crayfish, egg, mollusks, wheat, rye, barley, fish, gluten, lactose, galactose, casein, peanut, soya, hazelnut, and sulfur dioxide. If you require gluten testing, a good place to start is the Celiac Society of Ireland, as they can advise on how best to achieve this. How often should I get my product tested? This is difficult to answer. In an ideal world, every batch should be tested. However, for many food producers, this is not a realistic option. Perhaps work with your regulator in determining the robustness of your production systems. There are a number of resources, both printed and audio-visual, available from SafeFood, the Food Safety Authority of Ireland, and the Food Standards Agency to assist food businesses in meeting their food allergen labelling obligations and thereby protect the health of their food hypersensitive customers. Thank you for attending this webinar. Now over to Tracy for the question and answer session.